I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, 1946, the youngest of 4 siblings. My dad managed lumber yards in various places in Nebraska. He died when I was 3. So my mother, she was always very strong. I had to say Mom was the best role model you could ask for. My mom gave me the 2 values to be honesty and hard work. In high school, it was, Vietnam had just started. We were just barely getting involved. And they were talking about, if you didn't stay in school, you'd get drafted and you'd be in Vietnam before you knew it. So I graduated from high school, went on to University of Nebraska, decided I'd sit out a semester, earn some money to go back to college. And while I was working, I got my draft notice. And my comment was, you serve, you don't refuse it. So in May of 1966, I went on my merry way.
Charles Hagemeister was drafted into the Army in 1966. After basic training, he was sent to Fort Sam Houston to be trained as a medic. Hagemeister arrived in Vietnam in November of that year and was assigned to A Company of the 1st Cavalry.
A Company, 1st to 5th Cav, was the division commander's ready reaction force. Whenever there was a fight, A Company got sent into it. And we were patrolling and securing villages and searching villages for most of March. We came out of the field on the 19th to our forward operating base. We were told we were going to link up with the company that had been ambushed at 8 o'clock that morning, and that they had lost most of their chain of command, and we were supposed to go in and link up with them. We landed and we started sweeping toward where this company was supposedly pinned down. And I realized I was out there at almost the end of the line. And so I started going to the platoon sergeant's machine gun squad, which was where the majority of my platoon was. And I got caught between the machine gun squad and the machine gun squads when the fire hit. More fire than I had ever seen in my life was coming in. We were surrounded right away. Denny Hale yelled that the platoon leader was hit. And so I got rid of my rucksack, kept my ammunition and my medical supplies with me, and took off to where the platoon leader was. And got the platoon leader, and he was hit in the side of the head. And I could see, while I'm between putting the dressing on the guy's head, I could see the guy shooting at me. And I can't do 2 things at once very well. So I picked up the platoon leader's rifle and shot the guy. Got the platoon leader taken care of, and Denny Hale, his RTO, is busy firing away, and I can hear the radio. I can hear High Pocket 6 calling on the radio, wanting to know what's happening. I'm the least employed of the bunch right now. So I pick up the radio and start telling the company commander, what the situation is, and what we need, and where we need to fire at, and everything else, and everything, just kind of taking charge, because I was the only one available. And then they said that the machine gunner, Tom Watson, was wounded, and his crew, and I took off out to the flank, because that's where I had been with them, and took care of Tom Watson and Thomas. And a kid named Baker's out there. He was the junior ammo bearer. He'd been in Vietnam probably 7 days. He is the left flank of the platoon now, and he's out there with his M16 firing up a storm. I look at him, and laying there in front of me is a machine gun. So I grab him and say, would it be better to use the machine gun? And Baker took that machine gun and held the left flank of the 1st platoon of the A Company the entire night. I went back and I told the company commander where we needed the artillery again and everything else. And we couldn't get airstrikes in because the company we were supposed to go relieve was too close to us to bring in our airstrikes between us and them, all this other stuff. And I told the company commander that, we needed some help up there. We needed some help really, really bad. And his comment was that the 3rd platoon couldn't find us. And and I'm saying, I says, we're in the middle of a fight. We got villages burning around us, and they can't find us. And so I said, I'm going back and get them. So I took off back to where the 3rd platoon was supposed to be. And I got back there and found them and told the platoon sergeant, because their platoon leader had been killed a couple of days before, that we needed some help, because I had more wounded than I had healthy people, and I needed people to get my wounded out.
Returning with help, Hagemeister placed the man in position to cover his advance, then moved forward to evacuate the first group of wounded. He then moved to the other flank and evacuated additional wounded men, despite the fact that his every move drew fire from the enemy. Hagemeister's heroic and selfless actions saved the lives of many of his comrades and inspired them as they fought to repel the enemy assault.
I had heard about the Medal of Honor, and they had talked about it when I went through basic and AIT. They told the stories about some of the Medal of Honor recipients, and it was almost comical, because when they were announcing who was going to what unit in Vietnam, and the macho kid in AIT, and you're standing around with all your friends, and I told a guy that I was drafted with. When they announced that we were going to the 1st Cav Division, I says, what a great opportunity. I said, I can go to the 1st Cav, I can get my Medal of Honor, no Purple Heart, and come back and get out of the Army. People accuse me that were there for that conversation, accuse me of intentionally going out to get it. And I always tell them, I said, no, it just happened. It wasn't the first time that all 4 services had been decorated at the same time. And President Johnson walks up, and imposing as he is, he reaches out and shake his hand, and he looks at me, he says, Specialist Hagemeister, he says, how long do you have left in the military? And I said, I have 72 hours, sir. And he's still got my hand, and he's just crushing it. He leans over my shoulder to the the Army 4-star general, and he says, you talk to him, convince him to stay. 22 years later, I retired. What I did on the 20th of March was, I did my job. Yeah, I had to do some things that were probably, not required of a medic, and as I said, nobody would have thought anything if I hadn't done it. But what I was doing that night was for the love of my fellow soldiers, and taking care of Chuck Hagemeister, and doing all those things just to make sure that the majority of us, or as many as possible of us, came out of that ambush alive.